Hi folks, Wooden Boat Dan here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. The podcast you're about to listen to was recorded several years ago, so some of the phone numbers, email addresses, website links, and time-sensitive information are no longer valid. Please keep that in mind as you listen. If you'd like to contact me, my email address is woodenboatdan@gmail.com. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Hooked on Wooden Boats weekly podcast episode number 15. I am your host, Dan Matson, and this is the world's first podcast fully dedicated to celebrating the art, craft, history, and tradition of wooden boats of all kinds. Sailboats, rowboats, wooden ski boats, wooden tugboats, you name it. If it's made out of wood, we like to talk about it on this show. Welcome back to episode 15. It's great to be here again. It's today I'm recording this, and it is December 28th. I hope you had a great Christmas. I had a good Christmas with my family. There was about 20 of us together, and ate a little too much, but had a great time, sang some songs, and did some fun things. So anyway, I hope you have a happy new year also. Well, we're in episode 15 now, and our audience is continuing to grow. In the month of December, we've had over 1,500 downloads of the podcasts that are online, so that's pretty cool. And I'm having fun as usual. Been out doing interviews with folks. Did 2 interviews this week that I'm going to play on future shows. This is a pretty cool gig. I mean, I get to go out and connect with people that I otherwise wouldn't be able to connect with and talk about wooden boats and their story, and it's a lot of fun. Featured segment today is an interview with Sara and Dee Meek. Sara and Dee live in Port Hadlock, Washington, and they own a tugboat called the Elmore, a wooden tugboat. It was built in 1890. It's 68 feet long, and they've owned it for over 20 years. Beautiful boat. They were kind enough to give me a tour of the boat and sit down and do an interview with me. So stay tuned. We're going to play that in a few minutes. Next week, we'll have an interview with Tug Busey. Tug built a 14-foot sailing pram and sailed it from Sioux City, Iowa, down the Missouri River and the Mississippi and the Ten Tom River and some other rivers to the Gulf of Mexico, and then took the intercoastal waterway east and north all the way to Maine, about a 4,000-mile trip over a 14-month period. So don't miss the interview next week. It'll be a lot of fun. I'd love it if you'd connect with me. There's quite a few ways to do it. You can connect with me on facebook.com/woodenboatdan, or you can follow me on twitter.com/woodenboatdan. I'd also love it if you go to the website, hookedonwoodenboats.com. My email address is dan@hookedonwoodenboats.com. And my voicemail feedback hotline is 424-261-2360. And I'd love it if you called the voicemail feedback hotline and left some questions, comments, anything like that. That would be pretty fun. Well, the last few weeks I've been talking about my next boat that I'm going to build. And I made a decision last week and ordered a book called The Canoe Shop, which I just got in the mail a few days ago. And it has plans in the book for building a 12, 14, and a 16-foot lap straight canoe. I've decided to make the 12-footer because it's the lightest. It's about 26 pounds according to the book. And it's using the lap stitch method of stitch and glue boat building. So anyway, I'm pretty excited about it. I've been kind of looking at the layout of all the strakes on 4 sheets of plywood, and I'm actually going to change the layout a little bit to conserve a little bit of the plywood. So I've been working on that. And next step is to get some money together to purchase the plywood, which will be a couple $100 or more. So I've got my golf clubs for sale. I don't golf anymore. I never really liked it. Well, it's, I don't know. If you like golfing, that's great. It's just not my game. I'm really lousy at it, and I don't like to do things that I'm not very good at. The only golfing I like to do is a short 9 course with my boys just for fun because we're all kind of hackers. So anyway, going to sell the golf clubs and put that towards some plywood for this boat. So I'm pretty excited about getting started on this thing. It's been 2 or 3 years since I really worked on any boats, so I can't wait to get in the shop and get my hands dirty. This week I received an email from Lee Bjorklund. Lee is on my email subscription list, and he's a local Seattle guy, a rower, and he owns a beautiful double-ended sailboat, a wooden sailboat called the Opus, which I showed a picture of in the website a few weeks ago. And he sent me an email here about his son. It's really a cool email, so I'm going to read part of it here. He says, "Hi, Dan. You mentioned that you're interested in boat pictures and stories." And he said, pictured, and he sent me a picture here, is a boat called the SV Yare, Y-A-R-E, built by my son, Tor. He saved up aluminum cans and lawn mowing money and bought the Tahitiana plans when he was 12 years old and pinned them to the ceiling above his bunk bed when other kids were oogling posters of female stars. Tor completed the School for Wooden Boats program in Port Townsend while at the UW School of Oceanography, where he's been employed the last several years. Upon graduation from the UW, he moved to Port Townsend at the age of 20, rented a barn where he could build Yare while working for Baird Boats as a boatwright, and he launched Yare in Seattle at Jensen Marine on his 30th birthday. The boat is admittedly of welded steel construction, but the internal woodwork is black walnut from a tree that he felled on Beacon Hill in Seattle. The lighter interior wood, yellow cedar, is from a telephone pole from about North 175th and Highway 99 in Seattle that was being replaced after being partially burned. The remaining interior wood is figured maple. Yare is moored at Jensen in Seattle. Tor and his wife Jess took it around Vancouver Island 2 years ago. This year, Tor, Jess, and their 1-year-old twin boys, Odin and Lars, sailed Yare to Glacier Bay and back during a 4-month adventure. Their trip can be seen at SVYare, that's SVYARE.blogspot.com, or bjorklundlog.blogspot.com. Lee Bjorklund. Anyway, I thought that was a pretty cool email. How many kids at 12 years old are so focused on what they want to do in the future that they start saving for it and get pictures of it and plan? Pretty cool story, so I thought I'd share that with you. If I get a chance, I'll put some pictures up on the website too in the blog post. Anyway, I'm going to move along here. We've got an interview now with Dee and Sara Meek. Again, they own a tugboat called the Elmore. Fascinating interview. I hope you enjoy it. So take it away, Dee and Sara. It is December 8th, 2011, and I am sitting on a tugboat that was built in 1890 with Dee and Sara Meek. Dee and Sara, welcome to the show today.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. Dee and Sara own this tugboat, the Elmore, 78-foot boat that was built in 1890, and it's moored in Port Hadlock, Washington. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And so we're sitting in the comfortable cabin, galley, rec room, kitchen, bedroom, hide-a-bed area, and we're on the water, obviously. So anyway, it's good to be here. So for our listeners, tell us about your background with boating and kind of a little bit about you guys personally, where you grew up and what you've been doing for the last few years.
You want to start? Or?
Sure. I was born in California.
Uh-huh.
And I have to say that I'm probably the only girl from Southern California that doesn't know how to swim,
Really?
really. And went to school in Utah, a small Presbyterian college, and got a degree in mathematics and moved to Richland with a job at Hanford Reservation.
Richland, Washington.
Richland, Washington.
Yeah.
And married, raised my kids there, and ended up going back to school and getting a master's degree in applied behavioral science. And along the way, I separated and divorced, and then I met Dee, and he was my veterinarian for my 8 cats at one time.
Wow.
And gave him a really good business, and then
Of course, she also ended up working for me for a couple of years.
Oh, really?
but for 12 years before we retired, I was the director of a domestic violence agency.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
In Franklin County, and during that time, about 1990, Dee had divorced, and we were courting and looking for something to do. In his retirement, he wanted to keep busy, and he came home one night, and he said, "How about an ocean-going tug?"
Ocean-going tug.
An ocean-going tug. And being head over heels about him, I said, okay. Not even dreaming what that was. Nor did I think he really knew either.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of our initial beginning of the Elmore.
Of course, the idea
Yeah.
came from an article I read about a couple that had taken a tugboat and converted it to a liveaboard as an ocean-going tug and cruised in it. And that really sounded kind of interesting to me. So
Yeah.
that's why I proposed it to her.
Okay. So,
But we
Sarah, did you do some boating growing up?
No.
Okay.
And the only thing that I did with water was on the Columbia River. Taught a lot of people to water ski.
Mm-hmm.
Took my kids water skiing,
Okay.
but I really didn't get in the water that much.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
was a little afraid of water over my head. Yeah.
How about you, Dee? Where did you grow up?
Well, all over, basically, because for one thing, my dad was in the Navy during the war, and so we traveled several different spots, clear from, Maryland to California, Idaho, Utah. But I was born in Salt Lake City, and then moved to California young, about 6 age, and so I learned to swim, even when I was probably not even be able to walk very well. So I was always around water and enjoyed it very much and didn't have a bit of fear for it. But my basic boating began when I was in high school. I joined the Sea Scouts, and that was just a fantastic experience for me because we had received a 40-foot, what's called a Liberty boat from the Navy, which also had a step for a mast, and but it was basically bare. And so our Sea Scout troop, or ship, called it, took on the job of making it a good sailboat. We went out to the forest and found a tree and cut it down for the mast and the booms. So
Really?
trimmed them up and made them.
What kind of tree did you cut down?
It was out in the forest, and as far as I remember, it was a Douglas fir. But,
Yeah.
then we also cleaned up the interior, built bunks for our members. We actually had 12 Navy-type bunks, which is just strictly a pipe put together in a rectangular form and then stretched canvas around it. And so that could fit in there. We built a cabin, put it over it, and the one thing we didn't do was make our own sails. We had to hire somebody that made sails that would do that for us.
Yeah.
And when I was a senior in high school, we finished the job, and this was in Woodland, California, just north of Sacramento, the lower Sacramento Valley. And we took the boat down to San Francisco Bay and cruised in it for a whole week, sailing all around the place. And
Wow.
and that's where I began learning sailing itself, and found that I really enjoyed the boats.
Yeah. So that was a wooden boat, probably.
That was a
right?
wooden boat. Oh,
Yeah. Planked boat.
Yeah, it was a 4-inch.
4-inch.
Oak hull, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was well built, and it gave us a good training because we had to do all the same things that Sea Scouts do, learning knots and navigation and all the stuff that required dealing with the water. So that when I left high school, went into college, I didn't really get back to the boats too well then. I ended up working my way through school and eventually ended up at Washington State University in the veterinary program, and graduated from there in '62. And then immediately when I got a job over in the Tri-Cities, I bought a little riverboat, a little 16-foot runabout, and did a lot of water skiing, the same as Sarah, and did that. But then I began leasing boats every summer out of Anacortes and cruising around the whole, all the Sound region. Over the years, got up into Desolation Sound quite frequently, and alternated between sailboats and power boats. But the largest one that I handled by myself was a 42-foot power boat.
Wow.
And didn't have any problems with it. Picked it up very, very quickly. Then met a guy he was in Sausalito, and I was in Rotary, and I went down to Rotary, or went down to San Francisco for part of my reserve duty. I stayed in the reserves because I was in the military right after high school there, and went down there and happened to meet at a Rotary meeting this gentleman from Sausalito that was an ex-mayor of Sausalito, and got to become friends with him, and he invited me to come up and in my time that I was there to help him work on this sailboat that he had just bought at a fire sale. Had a fire in it, and so he bought it and was fixing it up, and his plan was to go around the world. So that I helped him whenever I was down there for several years, and visited with him quite frequently. So he invited me when he was ready to go around the world with him in his cruise.
Really?
And I was working at that time. There's no way I could get away more than a couple of weeks, but I said that I'll go as far as I can in this 2-week period. So we started out, and eventually in the 2-week period I got down far to Puerto Vallarta in Mexico, and enjoyed that very much.
Wow.
And there were only the 3 of us on the boat, so that we all had watch that we had to stand, and so I learned a lot about sailing at that time.
Yeah, I bet.
It was a 50-foot catch, so it was a
wooden or fiberglass?
Oh, it was wooden.
Wooden boat. Yeah. And so you sailed down the coast, west coast, the Pacific Ocean, and around Mexico, and
and made intermittent stops at Santa Maria and in Cabo, of course. And cruised around there and then on to Puerto Vallarta, where we reluctantly had to get off and come back to work.
Mm-hmm.
But I kept in touch with him all times, and so that we visited frequently. But
so that probably got your interest going in boats even more than ever.
Yeah,
doing that adventure.
Really, accentuated my desire to have boats and do it.
Right.
So that when I got together with Sarah, and we were trying to decide, we wanted something in our second marriages that would not duplicate what we'd done in our first marriages. We wanted something to create our own tradition.
Yeah,
entirely different.
Yeah.
And so, as she said, we looked at everything. We were thinking about a B&B and traveling or whatever, but we weren't really sure on it until I read this article about the people that had picked up a tug, and I said, well, let's look into it.
So what magazine did you see that article?
I don't remember.
Do you remember? Okay.
Yeah.
So these people had bought a tug and fixed it up and lived on it, and that sounded pretty good to you, huh?
Oh, yeah, it did.
Yeah.
But we didn't have the slightest idea how to go about getting a tugboat.
Yeah.
And it kind of just laid there for a long time, the idea. And I think because we didn't know what to do about it. And we came up to Seattle. Dee had a meeting, and I was kind of at loose ends, so I decided to call. I opened the phone book and looked under tugs and saw Foss Company. So I called the Foss Company, and the gentleman answered the phone, and I said, do you have any tugboats for sale? He said, no. And he said, but I could rent you one. And I said, well, we were looking, we wanted to buy a tugboat. And he said, well, we don't sell them. But he said, you might look at a yacht broker. And I really laughed because I just couldn't imagine a tugboat being a yacht, being called a yacht.
Yeah.
And he said, he said, lady, you'd be really surprised at tugboats and what they do with them when they start working on them. And so that's what we did. He kind of pointed us to Lake Union Dry Dock, and we walked to docks down there looking at boats, and then we finally did look at a broker and go to a broker.
But they did have several old tugboats tied up there at the dry dock.
One of them had a tree growing out of the bulwarks.
Really? Been there a little too long, huh?
Yeah.
It was really fun. We still didn't know what we were doing.
That was down in Seattle?
Yeah, Lake Union.
Yeah.
And
so you started looking, and then tell me what you saw and how you got to the Elmore.
Well, we had made a bid on a very
yacht.
beautiful
tugboat that was a yacht.
Yeah, that was
big
one
yacht.
that had been rebuilt, and anyway, the owner decided that he'd had enough, and in the process, in the middle of construction on it, he decided to sell it. So we made a bid on it, and he accepted, and and it was up at
Friday Harbor.
Well, yeah, but anyway, we went up to take the boat down to Seattle for a survey. Got up there, and this was a big boat. It was 130 some odd, I think.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful boat. Just beautiful work done on it.
Yeah, the engine room you could almost eat off of. They talk about that, but it kept in very great shape. Anyway, he had an engineer that was keeping an eye on it and working on it. And the engineer says, "Yeah, I'm sorry to tell you, but he changed his mind." And he said, "Well, how could he do that?"
Because we put money down.
And we found out that our broker that we had gone to had not, even though we had given him a deposit, a down payment on it, he had not got him to sign a paper. So we had no legal way of getting it. So we got our money back, though.
Yeah.
And went looking, and we went into this one broker, and he says, "Well, I've got a tugboat that I can show you." So he ran us up to Everett and showed us this boat, and
Dee fell in love with it. I have to tell you that I hated it. It was so stinking and
literally stinky.
Really stinky little boat. It was bright. Floyd wanted to sell it, and so he had painted everything, so everything was really bright. But the brightness was orange and turquoise, and the outside was it was nice looking on the outside, but and very definitely nice tugboat lines to it. But it was really awful. And then when they started the engine, this Caterpillar, this 500 horsepower Caterpillar just screamed, just absolutely screamed. There was no talking. We couldn't have talked like this in the cabin at all because it was so loud. And unfortunately, I could tell that Dee really liked it, that he really, really liked it. And he said, so as we're driving away, he said, isn't it wonderful? Isn't it great? You know, and it's got, oh, isn't it wonderful? And I'm thinking, oh, you know, how much do I love this man? How much? So he decided, he persuaded me to look at it as a business deal, and that we would buy it and work on it for a year and then fix it all up. And this is how, I want to say how innocent and ignorant we were. And I don't mean that really derogatory, but how much we did not know about fixing up boats. And he said, well, we'll fix it up a year and then we'll sell it, you know, at a profit, and it'll be a business.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, I can go into it with an idea.
We were still halfway thinking about the B&B aspect of it. Maybe we could turn it into a B&B too.
Oh, really?
Because when we were dealing with the other boat, we had been talking to this one marina, and they said, if you can tie your boat up to our marina, and they had a hotel there along with it, said, and we can use it as overflow from our hotel, we'll pay all of the moorage expenses and a percentage of the rental to you. So we figured, well, heck, that'll take care of our major expense and at the same time make a little bit of money off it. And then if we can fix it up and sell it later on, then we'll be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, right.
So, as Sarah said, we were living in the Tri-Cities at that time, both of us still working.
Full time, you know, and both of our jobs, because he was on call, I was on call all the time, so it was 24/7. We were on call. We were both very, very busy, and we decided to make a bid on this. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
But it probably saved my life, because when we Friday afternoon, we'd throw the dog and the 2 cats in the car and head out. And by the time we get to top Snoqualmie Pass, my cell phone didn't work, my pager didn't work, and so I was, you know, free for a couple of days, and he was pretty much the same. So
yeah, working with the domestic violence is really hard.
So we came over, catch ferry, and worked maybe 5 or 6 hours on Saturday and a little bit on Sunday, and then throw the dog and the cats back in the car and head back. And
where was the boat at that time?
Eagle Harbor.
Eagle Harbor, is that on Bainbridge?
Bainbridge.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So you made the trek over from Richland pretty much every weekend and work on the boat for.
Yeah, we averaged 42 weekends a year plus, you know,
for the 8 years,
vacation days and.
You did that for 8 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
yeah, it was interesting in that.
So it took longer than a year.
The daughter, the one daughter that's an opera singer, she was still in training back in New York, but she took a job with Simon & Schuster to help pay for her training. And she would send us a care package every month because she had access to the
book
advertising tapes that they would send out. So that we got this whole box full of audio tapes. So we had it pretty well figured out when to stick a tape in the tape deck on the car as we left Richland. So it ended just as we pulled into the ferry terminal there in Seattle. Went through book after book after book. You know, it was great entertainment. And,
yeah.
The 2.5 hour, 3 hour trip just passed so quickly because of that.
Dee was getting a little deaf, and I don't speak really loud. So conversation, and we had a Suburban, and it's pretty roomy.
Yeah.
Was a little difficult, but these book tapes really, really helped us both.
Yeah.
And we did that. And the only thing I couldn't figure out is when we'd get home, I would be tired, and my laundry was never done. Never done.
Oh, wow.
But she also went back to work a lot more refreshed than if she'd
Yeah.
had to be dealing with
Just to have that break, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's when I started taking the paint off in here. And the first thing I worked on was this door. And I had decided when I was working on that this girl really needed a lot of help, this boat. And I kind of, as we cleaned her up, which was a massive job to clean her up.
Yeah, when you look at 13 coats of very heavily leaded paint in here, she had to peel every single bit of paint out of this cabinet, or cabin, top and bottom, and got it all cleaned up so we can decide what to do with the wood. We were thinking, first of all, of leaving it natural.
But it was so stained.
Then after we got the paint off, we discovered that there's so many black iron stains from the nails that had been used in there that it just wouldn't, well, it would look like this floor here.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
so we decided that the best thing to do would be repaint her. But she did all of this up here while I worked elsewhere. And then
So Sarah was up working in the cabin area, the living area, and the wheelhouse and all that, and you were down in the engine room.
right.
Yeah. So what were you doing in the engine room?
Besides getting
What weren't
dirty.
you doing?
Well, besides trying to clean, yeah, it was a dirty mess down there. I didn't realize it when we looked through it. I was a little too impressed with everything else. But as I said, this shipwright had taken all of the old things out of this shipyard that he was working in to repower this boat because he got it totally stripped of all the engines and everything. But he put a very old single-cylinder air-cooled air compressor in that did a great job of pumping up the air, except that it had this fan blade that kept going around to cool off the whole thing. And it had a leaky seal around the shaft so that this fine oil film would develop, and this impeller spinning around, it looked like this haze of moisture coming out, and so everything was black down there. And we have pictures showing me
oil blowing around everywhere.
Oh, yeah, it shows me coming out of there with these black streaks down my head where I would bump up against the beam, or got oil mess all around me. So that a lot of my job down there was just washing, scrubbing down, trying to get all the oil cleaned out.
I can't tell you how many gallons of simple green we went through.
Yeah. And
Wow.
so I was getting things cleaned up, and then also learning the system because I had to learn how to do the compressors and how to control the air start of the main engine and so on.
Yeah.
So that there was a lot of learning as well as just basically cleaning.
Yeah. Right. So you worked on the boat for about 8 years, and then you had it in pretty good shape, and then you started actually using it to do some cruising.
Well,
so tell me about, or what kind of cruising did you do then?
Well, we would take it out as we were working on it, even from Eagle Harbor. We would just maybe go around to the harbor that was next to Eagle Harbor,
Blakely.
Harbor, and just drop anchor and work on it for the weekend.
Oh, nice.
So that we would just take it on these short little hops.
Yeah.
Around. So we
And we
did
took her
use
down
it.
to the tugboat races too.
Yeah,
in
we
Olympia.
took her to the tugboat races, and
So-
the first time that we went down, the first year that we had her, we picked Floyd up because he wanted to go to the tugboat races, and of course that was the first time that Dee and I had been to the tugboat races, and she was entered in the class that the weight of the boat was, so we were actually racing, and that engine room got so hot, the engine got so hot, and I could hear these two guys. Dee was running up and down the stairs looking at the temperature, and they're saying, "Go, baby, go, baby." And I was out hanging onto the bow with life jacket on and watching this water come in boats. And I think we came in second, actually. She was pretty good.
Wow,
And
cool.
Yeah, it was. It was really cool. But after that, our insurance man said, "Don't you race. You can go in, but don't you race, you know."
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So what we did was we always came up in a very dignified last, you know, so we did go down quite a few times down to
fun.
Olympia, but that was a new experience. Everything was new. You know, we went into a new culture.
Yeah.
We didn't know the boating culture. We didn't know the language.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a real learning experience.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting, very fun experiences. Learning too. The first time we went through the locks, we had both my daughters on board, and we were leaving Lake Union, coming back, and Sarah and the girls decided that they needed to clean this inside cabin here because we were going to an IRTA, International Retired Tugboat Association meeting, where they had 4th of July. They had always had this yearly meeting that they alternated between U.S. and Canada because they had Canadian members. And this time it was at Port Ludlow, and so that we started going through, and they decided to clean the cabins. So all of a sudden here, all the mattresses and everything were piled out on the outer decks as they're cleaning inside. Well, of course, if you ever gone through the locks area, you get in the locks, and here are hundreds of people standing there looking down at you, doing whatever you're doing down there. And of course, with everything showing, everything dirty that was out on the decks, and they have a very definite protocol in going through and how you handle your lines. Well, I'm sure you know that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and so that I was busy trying to make sure that we were okay up above, and leaving the line handling to the gals down here.
And we didn't have any idea what to do and how to do it. And it was just really a horrendous job.
Yeah, they were screwing up right and left, and I didn't know it. I was too busy paying attention to other things until all of a sudden 2 ladies standing with the crowd looking up started calling down directions to these gals.
Oh, really?
Yeah, what to do, how to do it, and
they were long-time tugboat.
Oh, really? So they started giving direction, and that worked, huh?
And
they were on their way over to the tugboat meeting, but they were driving over.
I see.
And they saved our lives.
Oh,
they
wow.
saved our soup.
Yeah, they
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So we've got about 5 minutes left here. So give me a brief history of this boat.
Okay.
Where she was built and just some of the details.
Well, first of all, she was built in 1890 in Astoria, Oregon, as a passenger freight vessel by the Elmore Canning Company, along with another one, where they had apparently company assets, either a store or another cannery or whatever, down in Tillamook. So that they needed a boat that could carry their passengers and their freight between Astoria and Tillamook, because apparently there was no roads at that time. So that for 5 years, twice a week, they went across both the Columbia and the Tillamook bars, delivering goods and back and forth between Astoria and Tillamook.
And those are 2 of the most dangerous bars.
Yeah, I've been over the Columbia bar many times. Yeah.
Well, they're the 2 most dangerous in the world. So that, we felt we had to be pretty good shape to last for 5 years doing that.
Yeah. Okay.
And then at that time, as we said, we understood that the roads were built, and so they didn't need her anymore for that. And she was bought and then taken to Alaska for the gold rush, and she worked up there several different places. She had a run between
Golden Bay,
Kalispell.
Golden Bay, and
Kalispell and
Nome.
Prince of Wales Island.
Yeah, and Nome.
No, well, and then another Nome between Nome and Gullivan Bay, which is up in the Nooka Peninsula there. So that she, anyway, made several trips back and forth all around doing passenger freight. And then in '02, she was brought back down here, and 1902, she was brought back down here, and at that time she was finalized where the Captain Ramwell, deeded her over to the American Tug Company, and became a partner in that company at the same time. So she then became the flagship of the American Tugboat Company that was stationed in Port Townsend. So for the next 20 years, she worked all up and down the Puget Sound area, made some trips to Alaska, we understand, and did all of the tugboat stuff, because she was converted to a tug in '02, to a tug category, and had to winch, and they changed the cabin and so on. Then she did that until 1922, when she had a major fire and burned her almost to the waterline. And apparently they did decide at that time that they were just going to let her go, but then changed their mind later on, and then because the hull was still in very good shape, and so they rebuilt her at that point in a new configuration, and installed the first diesel engine in her at that time, and that was the first Washington S-step engine ever built, serial number 00, and so that she'd had that in her for 3 or 4 years, and then they kept on going from there. She was rebuilt in 1950, and then in 1970, well, there's several changes, and Sarah probably knows the companies that went on better than I do, but anyway, she was sold and ended up with Dunlop Towing,
who's in Anacortes. They're still there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she was leased to Dunlop by Puget Sound Tug and Barge that ended up owning her, and she was leased to them for 10 years. And they had a survey in this 1970 that said she had another 10 years of good active life left on her as a tug. So Dunlop used her for those 10 years and renamed her the Kiket, Kiket. And then in 1980, they determined that she had reached that 10-year period, and so according to their custom, they cut holes in her decks, ripped out all the equipment and engines and everything that was of any value, and was going to scuttle her. Well, a guy by the name of Updike in Seattle found out about it, and he loved these old boats, and he knew them and talked them out of it with the promise that it would not go into the hands of another tug company. He turned around and sold it to Floyd Waite, who was a shipwright in Everett, who then replaced all of the old empty sockets, engines and so on, with old stuff from his shipyard that had been taken out of other boats for repowering, and then lived on it for 10 years, docked at the back of Everett on the Snohomish River, so that he decided anyway after this 10-year period that he wanted a bigger one. So he started looking around and found one in the Dominion, a 120-foot tug, and put it up for sale, and that's where we found her.
And that was in 1991, huh?
1990,
yeah. 1990, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool. So where have you taken her? What's the farthest away you've been from here with this boat?
Alaska.
Really?
We took her to Alaska and cruised around there for a whole full summer, and made the mistake of inviting people to come up and join us, but we didn't tell them where we would pick them up. We said, where are you going to be?
Not the people, but not having them go where we wanted them to go.
Oh.
So we ended up going back to Ketchikan 5 different times to pick up people that are going with us. So we duplicated a lot of territory quite a bit.
Yeah.
But we did get as far north as Tracy Arm and the Teneke Hot Springs. We never got to Juneau or the Glacier Bay, but we did go around Baranof Island to Sitka and enjoyed that very much. To me, that was the best spot, was the outside of Baranof Island.
Yeah.
And
right.
so that we, in other words, cruised all around the central part. We didn't get into the Muskie Fords very far either. And that's what we would like to do next time.
Yeah, yeah.
But then Dee and 4 of his buddies circumnavigated Vancouver Island.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
They
it took
did-
6 weeks with that, and that was very enjoyable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, what's your favorite thing about the Elmore?
I think just being on the water. Gosh. You know, I enjoyed the work. I really have enjoyed the work.
The work, yeah.
We've done a lot of work. You know, we
Yeah.
covered plywood and done all kinds of things, but and meeting the people, different people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just been wonderful. People are gracious and helpful and eager to see the engine going. That was so much fun.
Right.
I mean, we had a couple of when we went up Fraser River in Vancouver, and we went by a park, and we got down to the public dock, and it was dark, and we had to find a place to moor. And by the time we got there and found an empty spot, there were 2 guys there to catch the ropes, and they had heard us in this park, which was probably a mile away, and had walked up, and they caught our ropes in order to get on board to see the engine run, because they thought the engine was so great.
Yeah.
You know, and things like that. We had that happen so often.
Right.
And people would come and say, you know, we've had older fellows come, and they're leaving us who had worked on it in some way, and we met 2 of the owners.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
American Tug. We met one of the owners. Yeah.
This is how we've been able to establish a history
lot
on
of
her
the
as much,
history.
because every time anybody came on board that said they had anything to do with her in any way, we asked them to sit down, write down any names they could remember of people that had been on board, working captains, engineers, and so on, or places they'd been, and their full involvement with it. So using that, we've been able to go back and put together.
I have a lot of names, so I haven't been able really to fit them in the dates, but I have a lot of names.
Yeah.
And it does have a lovely history. It's done really good work, and it worked hard. You know?
Yeah, if you just think of all the people that have worked on this boat and been on the water on the boat and all the places she's been over the years, it's just amazing.
I think that was one of the main things that really got me involved with her. Just hearing the history and seeing what she was, and you know, I guess wanting to be a part of all that. It just felt good about being able to fix her up and keep her going and keep her alive for other people to understand that history.
Right. So, any parting comments for our listeners today?
Get out on the water.
Yeah.
Come see our boat, and if you want to buy it,
they're
come make us an offer.
Yeah, you're thinking about selling her, right?
We are.
Yeah.
We are.
Well, we've had her for 21 years.
Yeah.
It's
And,
hard.
I think it's just time to pass it on to somebody that could re-energize, because
Yeah.
And the really great thing is it's an easy boat to run. You know, it's easy to live on. It's really easy to live on.
Right.
And
So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, how should they do that? What's the best way?
well, we have an email.
Okay.
It's my name, DEEMEEK, @AOL.com.
Okay.
Phone number 360-437-5121.
we have a card. We'll give you a card.
Yeah, I think you did give me a card actually. So I will include that information on the website when I put this episode up next week, so that anybody listening wants to contact you, they can. So
we're not rushing out to sell it. It's just that we're starting to look at options now, see if there's anybody that would be interested in trying to maintain this history and help her along.
Yeah, right.
She has a really strong tie with the Hastings family, in a real strong tie in Port Townsend because of the Hastings family.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, since
She.
the Lord Hastings was the founder of the American Tug Company. And of course, they have a big building named after him in Port Townsend. He was very involved in local.
Yeah, and he was one of the first families in Port Townsend, first non-native family.
Yeah.
And,
very cool.
Yeah, the more I look into that, the more I'm amazed at, the tie. And, but she's a great boat. She just really is. She's
beautiful
good for
boat.
Dogs and cats and and she's not a yacht, but she's
comfortable.
Comfortable.
Yeah, very nice.
And this last summer, we totally replaced 1/3 of the boat. The whole 1/3 of the front of the boat.
Because of the battering that she took.
Brand new wood.
Right. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun, and I wish the best to you in the future with the Elmore.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot.
Much. Yeah.
Okay. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Dee and Sara Meek, talking about their tugboat, the Elmore, and it was really a blast getting to meet them and see their boat up close. I'm going to put some pictures of it on the website and give a little more history of the boat also. Thanks for tuning in again this week. We're going to wrap things up here. You can subscribe to my podcast on iTunes. If you go to iTunes and click on the podcast menu item at the top, that'll take you to the sports section, and you can go outdoor sports, and then eventually you'll get to my site, to my podcast. But actually an easier way is to go to the search box and put in hookedonwoodenboats.com, and that'll take you to my site, or not my site, it'll take you to my podcast on iTunes, and you can subscribe there. So every week it's automatically delivered to your computer or your mobile device where you can listen to the podcast. And I'd love it if you gave me a 5-star review on iTunes if you enjoy the show. That'd be cool. I'll mention one more time, my feedback hotline is 424-261-2360. I would really appreciate it if you would call in with any questions or comments you have about the show. I'd love to get some feedback that way. Next week, just a reminder, is the interview with Tug Busey, and it's going to be really fun. So come on back next Thursday. This is a weekly podcast, released Thursday of each week. So anyway, that's going to be the end of the show here, folks. Have a great week, and this is Wooden Boat Dan. Keep the sunny side up and the barnacled side down. Over and out from my end of the world. Wooden Boat Dan. See you later. Bye-bye.